Hello there, and welcome to this episode of Force Ghost Conversations. This is your host, Anthony King, and this week I'm going to read and review my Star Wars senior thesis from college. If you're a fan of the podcast and would like to consider pledging your support, there will be a link in the episode description for you to check out the various tiers offered. Also, please be sure to check out our TeePublic store to buy some Force Ghost Conversations merchandise. And without further ado, it's time to gather around the campfire for some Force Ghost Conversations. All right, everybody, welcome back to Force Ghost Conversations and perhaps our most unconventional podcast to date. Yes, this is the episode where I'm finally going to read aloud my senior thesis from college that I wrote all about Star Wars and particularly Anakin Skywalker and his origin story. So that is going to be exciting and also terrifying at the same time. We'll get into that in just a little bit here, but I did want to note that this episode is kind of pre-recorded, so I do not know the news that has taken place over the past week. So no Cloud City gossip in this week's session. We will cover anything that has happened this week and the week that happens after in our episode that will come out on the following Sunday. So just, anything news-wise, we'll cover that later on. So don't worry about it. It's going to happen eventually. We're good for that, right? You know the drill at this point. We have to pre-record episodes based off schedules and stuff. The reason we are pre-recording an episode here today is because we are currently in Nashville at ICCC, the wonderful convention that'll be taking place there, and we will be boots on the ground and having a ton of fun and putting together hopefully a wonderful array of content and package for everybody that we can hopefully give to you all very soon here. So be on the lookout for that episode probably after so next Sunday's episode when this is released here. So yeah, and also be sure to follow us along on all the social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, because we will have a presence, of course, at the convention, and we will be posting pretty regularly throughout the course of the several days of the con. So you stay up to date with all the cool things that we're doing and the people that we meet. And of course, if you are at ICCC as well, we will be there. So we'd love to say hi. So if you see us, we will be in or I will be, not we, but when I say we, I mean the podcast. I will be in a Force Ghost Conversations t-shirt. I have 3 t-shirts, our Star Wars logo, our Willow logo, and our Indiana Jones inspired logo. And I'll be wearing one of those 3 on each day of the con. So if you see us on the floor or in a panel or something like that, just come up and say hi and tell us that you like the show or any feedback that you have, any of that stuff. We'll just have a fun conversation. So that is all of the housekeeping stuff that I have for this week's episode. But yes, this is the episode finally where I am going to read my thesis here. So just a little backstory on this one. I graduated from college in December of 2016, full semester early. Plugged everybody go do AP credits and summer classes and all that stuff. Take extra classes, get done early. It's less expensive. But I did graduate early from my university. I went to Hood College in Frederick, Maryland, where I got my bachelor's degree in history. And minored in public relations, concentration in public history. That's my whole background in terms of education. But I also was a part of the honors college in the school, and through that, you have to take one class a semester, roughly, if I'm remembering correctly, through the honors program specifically. And there are other benefits to it, of course, so I won't get into all that because that's not necessarily needed for this purposes of this conversation. But the last class that you are supposed to take for the honors program, or theoretically like one of your last semesters or something like that, is like a honors seminar where the purpose is creating some type of large thesis at the end. So I kind of lucked out in the fall semester of 2016 with this class. It was honors 470. I think it was like Heroes and Monsters or something like that it was called. I can't remember the exact title, and I don't remember the exact professor, but I remember she was pretty cool, and she was very lenient with all the wacky things I wanted to talk about. It I eventually will talk about in my thesis here. So yeah, so it was definitely looking at the hero's journey and looking at the different types of monsters and interpretations over the years and how these things have changed. What is a hero? What is a monster? Is it a perspective thing? Does the storytelling and the medium matter? How does this change over the course of time and space? That was the fun aspect of the show, of the class. We got to watch Star Wars, talk about that. When I say Star Wars, I mean New Hope, 1977. Discuss it with the class and several other things. I did a Walking Dead uh, kind of video. It might still be online still, so if you can track that down on YouTube, it kind of does exist still. So there is a lot of fun that we had in this class, and like I said, the big thing was creating um, a thesis of sorts about something dealing with the concept of heroes and monsters. And the thing that I was most excited about was, obviously, when I got this opportunity, I said, "Oh, I'm going to do something about Star Wars because that is my bread and butter." Type of thing. And what is the thing that most interested me the most? Well, I did say that I'm a historian, so I'm interested in the past, but more so how things happen, right? The prequel aspect of everything, right? What is the lead up to the event that made the event possible? Those are the things that interest me the most. And frankly, when it comes to Star Wars, that is an origin story. So really, what I did was a thesis on the origin of Anakin Skywalker. This was supposed to be a multimedia kind of thesis as well. So there are links and video clips embedded within the story throughout it. Um, Also, we had a lot of, because of that format, we had a lot of wiggle room of, you could do, so the basis was it had to be at least 30 pages. I think mine is like well over that, so be warned, everybody, when you're listening to this. um you could do one 30-page paper, two 15-page papers, three 10-page papers on a certain topic, 31-page papers, right? You could do whatever you wanted as long as it kind of was coherent and made sense and was within a certain thematic element. So my thematic element was the origin story of Anakin Skywalker and extrapolating that. And it went through various iterations over the course of the semester. I think my first draft was done in September, towards the end of September. So around this time in 2016, almost 10 years ago now. And yeah, eventually I got an A on the thing, so that was a good thing, and went through a lot of variations. So it eventually became roughly 3 over 10 pages of story or something like that. There's 3 essays within it. It's a collection of essays all about Anakin Skywalker and his origin story. So I have not actually read this since I submitted it. I forgot that I didn't never forgot that I had done it, but it kind of was in the back of my mind for a while. But I thought I lost it, to be honest. I had a computer that completely just died a few years ago, which is where it was located at, and I thought that was it. But then in cleaning out my parents' attic like a year or two ago, we discovered that there were I actually had a print copy still of it. So that is why we're able to have this conversation here today. So first off, this conversation is kind of to record it in another way, but also to just kind of recite it aloud again. And this is my first time looking at it since hitting submit and all the months and redrafts and toil that I took over it. So you have to remember, this is a time and place thing. And so it was written in an era before Rogue One. um, I pretty much was caught up to date with everything canon up to that point. I incorporate some Legends aspects into it as well because the teacher did not care about canon and Legends at that point. Um, so that is this. So this is my first time looking at this thing. I'm sure I'm going to cringe based off of my reading analysis of it. But I wonder if I had rewritten. It's gonna be funny because it'll be like, oh, I know this now because of like Obi-Wan Kenobi. Maybe The Last Jedi would come into play here with a lot of different things. The Rise of Skywalker, perhaps as well. Um, Rebels Clone Wars is now finished too in this new timeline that we have here. So I wonder how those aspects would have impacted this story had I known, or had I written about it now or known about it then, this would have been coming to pass. So these are going to be the fun things of looking in hindsight about it here. But yeah, I'm just going to start reading it through here and hope everyone enjoys this and bears with me through this as I also like, what am I getting into here? So the first page here is just a title page. It's a collection of essays regarding Anakin Skywalker's origin, and I, of course, have the visual image of a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. The opening before the opening crawl in every Star Wars film. So that is the first page there. So let's get into this. The introduction. As a historian, I have always been more intrigued by how something comes to pass rather than the actual event itself. Perhaps this reasoning explains why I have been curious of origin stories and its relation to the tales of both heroes and monsters. Ever since I was a young child, I have been obsessed with the Star Wars saga. The complexity of the characters and the epic storytelling was a stimulating part of my intellectual development. For this project, I had the perfect opportunity to combine my attraction to origin stories with my love for Star Wars. The one character from the saga whose origin story that I wanted to explore in depth throughout this project was Anakin Skywalker, aka Darth Vader. Throughout the three papers within this portfolio, I discussed the relationship between Skywalker's uncommon origin as a slave, the impact that his upbringing in slavery had upon his emotions and personal attachments while a Jedi, and the importance of these feelings in achieving his redemption at the end of the story. Skywalker's past reveals the interconnectivity between an individual's developing years and the decisions made throughout one's life. Although people may change as years pass, the basic feelings that are fostered during one's youth continue to reside within each person, affecting his or her choices and beliefs. Skywalker's origin as a slave is rather complicated given the fact it serves as the foundation for both his actions as a Jedi and his ruthlessness as a Sith. In the end, understanding Skywalker's origin is essential to comprehending the overall Star Wars story and its applicability to the real world. So that is my introduction there. I actually have a nice picture here of kind of the fear, anger, hate, suffering uh, of Anakin throughout the prequel films, and of course the suffering being Darth Vader here. So let's go on to the first section here, which is titled The Chosen Slave, an analysis of the slave origin of Anakin Skywalker. I love that we're getting intellectual and academic here. Let's get academic on Force Ghost Conversations. So let's dive into this thing. In the realm of fantasy, fiction, and most notably comic book stories, the hero of the tale is often supplanted with a backing origin anecdote. In Joseph Campbell's Seven Archetypes for the Hero's Journey, the hero can be defined as the protagonist or central character whose primary purpose is to separate from the ordinary world and sacrifice himself for the service of the journey at hand, to answer the challenge, complete the quest, and restore the ordinary world's balance. The origin characterizes the hero for the reader, providing details about how he or she receives power or a call to action. Ultimately, then, the origin story of a hero plays a central role in establishing the hero's mission and moral position in utilizing his or her powers. For writer Peter Coogan, the mission is central to the definition of a hero. As Coogan states, the mission convention is essential to this superhero genre because someone who does not act selflessly to aid others in times of need is not heroic and therefore not a hero. Coogan later writes, without this mission, a superhero would be merely an extraordinarily helpful individual in a crisis. Without this acceptance of duty, the hero would never set forth on the journey, achieving his or her ultimate destiny. The origin story provides the basis for how the hero receives his or her powers or mission in helping others. But why are these origin stories so important for an outsider's understanding of the character? As Robin Rosenberg writes on the importance of the inclusion of the origin story, those writers were keen observers of human nature. In doing so, they, origin stories, tap into our capacity for empathy, one of the greatest powers of all. For the viewer, empathy is paramount to the successful understanding of the character. Although the origin story may represent circumstances which would never transpire in daily life, individuals can comprehend the event and feel sympathy for the transformed character. The basis of the origin story enables the audience to interject their own experiences and personal accounts into the narrative, establishing more relatable figures within the continuity of the tale. The DC Comics superhero Batman is a pivotal illustration of the concept that origin stories, for many heroes, feature some kind of traumatic event, providing the individual with his or her powers and mission. Although Batman's origin has been widely portrayed through comics, television shows, and movies, the story is often retold. It provides a basis by which new and old fans can start the story on an equal level without requiring prior knowledge. In the opening scenes of the film Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, for example, the viewer immediately witnesses the origin leading to the foundation for Batman's mission as a crime fighter. A young Bruce Wayne watches a gunman murder both his mother and father after leaving a movie theater in Gotham. At their funeral, Wayne escapes from the procession and falls into an old cave filled with bats, finding solace and comfort with the creatures. When Wayne reaches an appropriate age, he becomes the hero with the persona as the Batman. As Coogan notes, the Batman strikes terror into the hearts of criminals. His code name embodies his biography. The singular traumatic event of his parents' death drives Bruce Wayne into a life of crime fighting, assuming his role in the hero's journey. In most cases of popular stories of heroes, the character receives a call to action after a certain traumatic event occurs in the individual's life. As Philip Sandifer explains in Amazing Fantasies, Trauma, Effect, and Superheroes, regarding trauma and the hero's origin, at any given moment, the operative past of a superhero is an accumulation of trauma. The most obvious of these traumas is the trauma of the origin story, which is typically the primary motivation for why the character dresses up in spandex and fights crime. Sandifer points out an interesting combination between the trauma endured during the origin event and the undertaking of the heroic journey. For most heroes, the character can identify a singular moment in which his or her heroic origin was born. For example, there is a clear distinction in the mind of Bruce Wayne and the reader/viewer for that matter, denoting a separate time before and after the traumatic event. In that exact moment, a hero, the Batman, is produced and changed as a result, giving new purpose and meaning in life. However, what if there was not such a clear distinction in the singular moment, resulting in the formation of the hero? Batman's traumatic origin event, as an example, lasts only for a few mere minutes. Although Batman still suffers a great deal of trauma from that moment, the event itself proves to be rather short lived. Instead, what if the traumatic event was prolonged over an extended period of time? Examine the origin story of Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker. Throughout his life, Skywalker proves to be the most essential and controversial character in the Star Wars universe. As the central figure of the saga, he obtains the status as both the overall hero and villain of the plot. Designated as the Chosen One from a Jedi prophecy, it was foretold that Skywalker would bring balance to the Force. Although Skywalker later fulfills that prophecy, he undergoes a complete transformation, both physically and ideologically, immersing himself with the dark side of the Force. He would become a pawn for the evil empire, ruthlessly killing anyone who dared to cross his path without remorse. This period in his life provides the basis for confusion about whether to categorize the talented Force wielder as a hero or villain. The duality of character traits in Skywalker's psyche blurs the lines between being a good hero or a villain. The foundation for both the good and bad actions Skywalker undertakes in his life, though, derives from his continued trauma from his origin in slavery. As a young child growing up on the remote desert planet Tatooine, both Skywalker and his mother, Shmi, lived as slaves under the property of a Toydarian parts dealer named Watto. The trauma of this prolonged forced servitude would have a lasting effect on his personality and actions. By considering the uncommon origin of this character in the Star Wars saga, one can attain a greater understanding as to why Anakin Skywalker turns to the dark side and what prompts his ultimate redemption at the end of the story. Although this forced servitude would haunt him through repressed anger and blind passion, Skywalker also understands the importance of family, love, and compassion as a result of his experience as a slave. The combination of these traits remains central to the character of Anakin Skywalker. As told in Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, Skywalker had been a slave since he was 3 years old. It was said that both he and his mother became slaves to pay off debts to Gardula the Hutt after betting on the local pod races. Eventually, the two were purchased by the junk dealer Watto, sometime before Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn and his associates entered the Tatooine system. When the audience is first introduced to Skywalker in The Phantom Menace, his status as a slave is evident. He wears dirty, ragged, and simple clothing, illustrating his lack of money and resources as a slave to improve his visual appearance. Although his master Watto displays no signs of excessive physical force towards Skywalker, signs of verbal abuse exist, having a lasting effect on the young child. Watto refers to Skywalker purely as the boy, constantly in the film. dehumanizing him to a place underneath the Master. In addition, Watto's tone when speaking towards Skywalker is aggressive, factoring into a prolonged trauma that would affect Skywalker throughout his life. Before the Boonta Eve pod race, Skywalker's nemesis, Sebulba, refers to him as a slave scum, further degrading him as subhuman. These examples throughout The Phantom Menace encompass the few instances that the audience of Star Wars witnesses the Skywalker's slave status. Despite the fact that the viewer receives limited knowledge about Anakin Skywalker's overall slave experience, much information can be inferred from the general experience of slaves within historical contexts, drawing similar parallels applicable to an understanding of the prolonged suffering that Skywalker endured. The overall trauma of his slave experience continues to have an immense impact upon the life and decisions of Anakin Skywalker beyond his emancipation. As Kenneth Allen Adams writes in the Psychohistory of Child Maltreatment Among Antebellum Slaveholders, regarding the trauma that slaves who were children experienced, psychological traumatization was frequent. Some instances of maltreatment children and slaves endured while in bondage included beatings, whippings, the splitting of families, as well as virtually every form of abuse imaginable. The lasting effects of these daily horrors had a direct impression upon the lives of slaves after earning their freedom. As a former slave, one can see these examples of continued post traumatic occurrences in Skywalker throughout the combined films, television shows, and expansive media of the Star Wars extended universe. For example, in the continued saga, Skywalker is forced on numerous occasions to return to the place of his origin on Tatooine. These experiences on his home planet reopens old wounds regarding his slave experience in which he tries so desperately to put behind him. Just before Skywalker and his mother part ways in The Phantom Menace, she repeats to him, Don't look back. Don't look back." In context, one can easily interpret this message by meaning to let go of the past and instead look towards the future. However, that concept is more complicated when analyzing a former slave, since the institution itself had been ingrained within him. Skywalker struggles to separate the two periods from one another because the ideals and memories of slavery had been a part of his daily existence for an extended period. In Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, an older Anakin Skywalker returns to Tatooine in search of his mother and discovers his old master Watto. From their short conversation, Skywalker is more assertive and angered both in his speech and facial expression towards Watto. In fact, Skywalker's face shows signs of internal pain and suffering, as if all of his past slave experiences as a child resurfaced. Another example of the resurfacing of slave trauma occurs when an older Anakin Skywalker says to Padme Amidala, "I don't like sand. It's coarse, rough, and irritating, and it gets everywhere." At first glance, this dialogue may seem unnecessary to the progression of the plot. However, when taking into consideration Skywalker's background and continued trauma, the quote begins to hold a deeper meaning in understanding his character. As a slave, Skywalker was forced to work tirelessly in the deserts of Tatooine for years. When Skywalker utters this line, the pain in his voice reflects his childhood suffering. The dialogue in this sequence helps to shed light on the larger effects of slavery on Anakin Skywalker. Historical research conducted on African American slaves in the United States reveals that these individuals struggled with vocal and speech patterns in the New World. Oftentimes, these slaves created pockets of their own language and methods of understanding. Skywalker appears to have adopted a similar methodology during his servitude as well. When the audience is introduced to Skywalker in The Phantom Menace, he asks Queen Padme Amidala, "Are you an angel?" Padme immediately responds in disbelief with a question of her own. "What?" This initial interaction shows how Skywalker is unaccustomed to communicating his thoughts and feelings with others. This inability would continue to haunt him throughout his life. Few individuals would make such a claim when first meeting another person, because the tone sets the conversation in a style that is abnormal. Overall, the main characters he interacted with regularly were both his mother and his master. As a slave, Skywalker most likely would have been told to stay quiet and out of sight when guests visited the shop. Despite the fact that his origin is complicated and mostly internal, by comprehending the various aspects of Skywalker's slave upbringing, the audience can begin to fully empathize and understand the decisions made throughout his life. Skywalker has a troubling past, with prolonged after effects due to his length of servitude. As the story is known today, Star Wars, in a sense, is the tragedy of Anakin Skywalker. He remains the central figure of the saga, resonating as both the hero and the villain of the tale. As the opening text for an episode of Star Wars The Clone Wars states, where we are going always reflects where we come from. In studying the various nuances of Skywalker's being, the viewer can develop an appreciation and sympathy for a character who endured substantial suffering during his life. The awareness of Anakin Skywalker's origin and slavery is pivotal to fully perceiving the deep inner context of the Star Wars universe. And that concludes the first section of this thesis. I hope you're all enjoying it and following along with what my thought processes were here. Definitely was uh, combination of my interest in history and just understanding people and culture, and kind of infusing that with what we see in Star Wars, looking at Star Wars more so from a um, anthropological and perhaps historical narrative perspective here, rather than just seeing it as a space opera that is a set in a galaxy far, far away, not connected to ours at all. I'm seeing, at least at that time, I was connecting the dots of like, oh, I see real world examples in that, and that's what I was trying to extrapolate there. I think for the most part. So let's get on to section 2 here, which is more so about Anakin and his time as a Jedi and how his origin story really helps to understand his actions overall throughout what we see here. Just had to grab a quick uh, little drink of water here, just because I forgot how much I actually wrote back in the day here. All right, section 2. The Chosen One. Understanding the actions of Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker through the prism of his origin story. Through his time with the Jedi Order, Anakin Skywalker's actions can be best described as angst ridden, rebellious, and distrusting of authority figures. He rebels against the Jedi Code, defying the Order's greatest principles by falling in love, taking a wife, fathering children, possessing attachments to individuals that could interfere with the duties of the Jedi, killing unarmed prisoners, and further disobeying commands from ranking officials. Particularly in the events of Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, Skywalker continually disobeys his teacher, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and the greater Jedi Council for that matter, unleashing his unrestrained anger at numerous points. Furthermore, Skywalker's conduct within the later Clone Wars provides the taste of success that would transition the young Jedi down the path of destruction. Skywalker's behavior connects back to his origin as a slave on Tatooine. He is also influenced by the fact that he is the chosen one, as predicted in Force Legend. The combination of these factors further explains the attitude and emotional outbursts of Anakin Skywalker during his time as both a Jedi, Padawan, and Knight. Even as an older Jedi, the lingering trauma of his slave origin continues to impact Skywalker's life. In an episode of Star Wars The Clone Wars, Obi-Wan Kenobi states Anakin has struggled to put his past behind him. Any mention of his prior existence triggers feelings of internal suffering and agony in Skywalker. Shortly before Kenobi states his aforementioned line, though, Skywalker aggressively says, Zygarian slum, or scum, there, Zygarian scum, I'll handle that slaver. At the same time that he utters this phrase, Skywalker uses the Force to pull a transmitter out of the air and crushes the piece of technology in his hand out of anger. Skywalker later finds the slaver and, with the help of his Padawan Ahsoka Tano, subdues the Zygarian while attempting to flee. In this moment, Tano narrowly prevents Skywalker from murdering the slaver as he speaks to the individual in an overly aggressive and forceful tone, pointing his lightsaber at the Zygarian's neck. These occurrences reveal particular instances in which the trauma of Skywalker's slave origin has surfaced once more, influencing his thoughts, feelings, and actions. From these occasions, it appears as if Skywalker cannot control either himself or his emotions when dealing with aspects of his past. Skywalker had made attempts to repress the past and distance himself from the young slave boy on Tatooine. However, as in life, everyone is molded by their surroundings and upbringing. Skywalker's past is inescapable, and his repressed feelings of anger, rage, power, and hatred eventually places him on the path towards evil. More importantly, Skywalker often acts out of arrogance and disregard towards authority figures, showcasing his power and status as a member of the Jedi, which had been denied to him in slavery. Within Attack of the Clones, the most glaring example of Skywalker's arrogance occurs when he deliberately defies the orders of the Jedi Council. In this action, Skywalker leaves the planet Naboo, where he was supposed to be protecting Senator Amidala, and travels to Tatooine in search of his mother. The skepticism and general mistrust of authority figures are traits commonly seen among slaves in retaliation for the trauma endured at the hands of an overbearing master. As Kenneth Allen Adams states, some acts against children may have resulted from slaves' deliberate efforts to resist patriarchal tyranny, i.e., acts aimed at children in reprisal for previous actions by masters and others. Some are more spontaneous acts of outrage or indignation, prompted by the frustrations, impulses, or happenstances of life under slavery. Ultimately, the lashing out against his authority figures stems from a prolonged feeling of helplessness and suppression of individuality, hindering young Skywalker from truly expressing himself. In the miniseries Star Wars Clone Wars, when late for his knighting ceremony, Skywalker downplays the event's importance by stating to Obi-Wan Kenobi, "If I'm late for another scolding, does it really matter? And as far as your wisdom goes, you're no Qui-Gon Jinn." Resisting authority in his life was an attempt to assert his dominance, protecting himself from the resurfacing agony of situations resembling slavery. One of the most famous quotes from the Star Wars saga comes from Jedi Master Yoda, explaining the slippery slope towards the dark side. As Yoda says, fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. These emotions, however, are taught to individuals. The younglings of the Jedi Order, trained at the Jedi Temple since their birth, certainly would not have learned these emotions due to their environment. Skywalker's slave origin ingrains these emotions within himself. By using Yoda's quote as a prism for understanding the logical progression resulting in one's transformation from good to evil, viewers can recognize that Anakin Skywalker maintained these emotions from a young age. Skywalker's lack of emotional control ultimately produces a situation of turmoil, leaving him with the choice to act out of fear or release his personal attachments. Due to Skywalker's exceptional abilities with the Force, he climbed the ranks of the Jedi Order faster than any member previously. As Obi-Wan Kenobi says regarding his powers, his abilities have made him arrogant. One can begin to formulate why this arrogance and his close bond with personal possessions would have taken hold. Especially coming from a slave background, Skywalker owned only a few items as a slave, since he was considered another individual's property. Once he grows accustomed to power and possession, eventually the two ideals combine, culminating into an ultimate lust for power, as Kenobi later refers to this phenomenon within Skywalker. Skywalker fears to lose what he has earned, a trait derived from his time in slavery. When he is first exposed to the real world outside of the confines of Tatooine and freed from the restraints of slavery, Skywalker struggles to distance himself from attachments. This desire for something greater than the ordinary manifests itself once more when he is an older Jedi Knight. In a conversation with his wife, Padme Amidala, Skywalker says, "I'm not the Jedi I should be. I want more, but I know I shouldn't." As a child, his personal ideas of traveling away from his slave home and his desire for a life filled with adventure laid the foundation within Skywalker, leading into his ultimate transformation as Darth Vader. In the end, the greed for a life beyond the normalcy of a slave sets him down the path of suffering, despair, and hopelessness. From a young age, Jedi are taught that possession and attachment are forbidden. Skywalker, though, joined the Force around the age of 9, while other young Force users are brought to the Order shortly after their birth. As a result, Skywalker had preconceived notions of property, attachment, loss, and suffering impressed within his psyche due to his slave treatment. As Star Wars creator George Lucas himself even states, that's why they say he was too old to be a Jedi, because he made his emotional connections. In addition, Skywalker understands the complexity of human emotions such as fear, anger, and rage in a different context as opposed to other Padawans from his prior experiences. These feelings were repressed due to the pain remembering his slave upbringing. From what the audience sees of his master in The Phantom Menace, Watto is often prone to lashing out, particularly when money and property are involved. One can view the similarity in Skywalker through his first scene in the film. Queen Padme Amidala inquires towards Skywalker, "You're a slave?" Angrily, Skywalker replies, "I'm a person, and my name is Anakin." Even from a young age, Skywalker withheld the influence from his former master, displaying its effect later in life when he was in a position of power in the Jedi Order. Throughout the series, Skywalker is known for his sudden actions, provoked as a result of passion, fear, rage, and anger. In Attack of the Clones, Skywalker unleashes his temper against the Sand People, Tusken Raiders, in retaliation for kidnapping, re enslaving, and killing his mother. As Skywalker says, I killed them. I killed them all. They're dead. Every single one of them. And not just the men, but the women and the children too. They're like animals, and I slaughtered them like animals. I hate them. At this point in the narrative, Skywalker acts out of passion and anger in the loss of something he cherished. The relationship with his mother in an interview with Rolling Stone, Lucas states, regardless of how his mother died, Jedis are not supposed to take vengeance. His undoing is that he loveth too much. For the most part, Anakin Skywalker's conduct as a Jedi can be best defined as acts of fervor. As seen in later installments of the Star Wars franchise, the guise of passion can be further manipulated, leading to recklessness and acts of selfish gains. The lingering trauma of the slave origin of Anakin Skywalker has directly impacted the choices and actions and decisions the character makes while both a Padawan and a Jedi Knight. The feelings of fear, anger, passion, love, and attachment surface at various points during his time with the Order. Overall, these sensations lead him to challenge and question the Jedi and their way of life. By openly rebelling against the formal structure of the Jedi, Skywalker attempts to free himself from any form of restraint that held him back. Despite the fact that Skywalker is the chosen one, he still maintains the fear of loss for his loved ones, eventually causing him to betray his fellow Jedi brothers and sisters and join the Sith out of desperation. Woo! All right. So we are 2 down. We've got 1 to go. And that was about how I believe that, or at the time, let's just say, I believe that his origin story and slavery really impacted his upbringing and leads us to understand the actions and implications of what Anakin Skywalker does in the prequel trilogy to a greater angle and degree. So this last part here is about how his origin story impacts his time as a member of the Sith as well as Darth Vader, which also is a second origin story too, which kind of fascinated me at the time as well. So let's kind of get into this here, and then it will wrap up everything here. So this is section 3, folks, which is titled "Making a Sith." Dissecting the origin story of Darth Vader and its effect on his redemption. And this is, of course, I think after the Netflix series Making a Murderer came out, it kind of took the world by storm at a certain point. And that's kind of where I had that play on words there, making a Sith. And I actually have a picture here too. I think it was from the same era as well. It kind of gave me the idea. So full credit to the Star Wars Minute for making that image, and I credited it appropriately in the essay that I submitted here. So, which is kind of the picture that I'm getting at is the Making a Sith title with Jake Lloyd's Anakin Skywalker, also kind of interposed with Hayden Christensen's Anakin Skywalker as he's professing to Obi-Wan at the end. I brought peace, freedom, justice, and security to my new empire. All right, let's dive into section 3 here and close this out. Unlike most characters in the science fiction or superhero genres, in Star Wars, the character Anakin Skywalker possesses the rare instance of having 2 origin stories. The first origin story, which continues to have an impact upon the rest of his life, results from a childhood upbringing as a slave and the associative trauma that lies underneath from that experience. The second origin story derives itself from the creation of Darth Vader, transforming himself into a user of the dark side of the Force. As Obi-Wan Kenobi states to Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader's son, in Star Wars Episode 6 Return of the Jedi, your father was seduced by the dark side of the Force. He ceased to be Anakin Skywalker and became Darth Vader. When that happens, the good man who was your father was destroyed. The lasting impact from the trauma of Skywalker's original slave origin plays an immense impact upon the desire for power that forges the ruthless villain Darth Vader. Anakin Skywalker embraces the mentality of the dark side as a result of fear and the powerlessness that combines itself with the threat of losing loved ones. In the same respect, though, the repressed feelings of care, family, and love within Vader would surface once more, culminating with his ultimate redemption at the story's end. Ultimately, the fear of loss prompts Skywalker to follow the dark side of the Force, join the Sith, and become Darth Vader. Although his intentions to save his wife and unborn child from death may have come from righteousness within his heart, His willingness to make sacrifices for those he cared about pushes Skywalker down the path of destruction and evil. The close ties that he held with his loved ones finally initiates the en anti that's the enantiodromia. Enantiodromia? What kind of hold on? What kind of word am I using here, folks? What kind of college thing is that? Enantiodromia. Wow, what a I don't think I've ever used that word since. So wow. Woof. All right, back into it. From an ideological standpoint, Skywalker cherishes his relationships with his mother, Shmi Skywalker, his wife, Padme Amidala, his first Jedi Master, Qui-Gon Jinn, and his close friend, Chancellor Palpatine. From a personal perspective, these relationships encompass the only true aspect of his life which brings him happiness. These few individuals trust him, treat him with dignity and respect, and fail to view him as dangerous. As N. Catherine Hales writes, one is driven by desire only if the object of desire is conceptualized as something to be possessed. The fear of losing these relationships amplifies Skywalker's internal desire for power, particularly with the aspect of preventing death. Skywalker would approach any idea with serious intentions. The exploitation of this trait by the Chancellor in Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith guides Skywalker to shift from his former person, bringing about the destruction of the Jedi Order through Order 66. Due to his upbringing in slavery, Anakin Skywalker maintains his own personal attachment to his mother, as well as the understanding of love, compassion, fear, and desire. Through his actions in the Star Wars saga, Skywalker proves that he would do anything for his loved ones, even if that means interfering with his Jedi obligations. For example, Skywalker, joined by his future wife Padme Amidala, leaves a security mission on Naboo to search for his kidnapped mother in direct defiance of the Council's orders. The bond to family and kinship originates from his origin in his environment in slavery. Similar to African American slave experiences in the New World, family connections helped individuals endure the horrors and trauma of the institution. The only true relationship that Skywalker had to aid him throughout slavery was a strong bond to his mother. When the two part ways in Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, one can observe the pain, sorrow, and fear of uncertainty in the future for the future in their eyes. I'm gonna take a sip of water here. All right, we're back. After Skywalker loses his mother in Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, he vows to search for means of protection for those he loves by stating, I will be the most powerful Jedi ever. I promise you, I will even learn to stop people from dying. This essential quote reveals the underlying young yearnings of Skywalker. He has equated true power with the ability to influence and prevent change, stopping even the natural order of life and death. The failure in saving his loved ones breeds feelings of desire and ambition within Skywalker, leading him towards his ultimate suffering. Once Skywalker has visions of his wife's death during childbirth, he begins to seek the power to save her. In remembering his failure regarding his mother's death, he decides to take action, attempting to learn how to save those he loves. This conclusion establishes a willingness and desire to go beyond the Jedi Code in discovering a method of preventing individuals from entering the afterlife. Skywalker ultimately feels betrayed by the Jedi, whom he believes is hiding the powers of the Force from him. Although his motives emerge from a sincere place, Skywalker's underlying intentions of this strength arises from an inner desire to exert control. The character of Darth Vader is born out of this desperation. Throughout most of Revenge of the Sith, Skywalker struggles with the inner turmoil that aligns itself with saving those he loves or protecting the galaxy by defeating the Sith Lord. One can empathize with Skywalker's decision, since most individuals would do anything to save loved ones if fate could be avoided. In the end, the close bond with family nurtured during slavery drives Skywalker to join the Sith and learn to know the dark side of the Force. As Christian Feistinger writes, being unattached to all worldly thoughts and things is part of an ideal way of life the Jedi represent, something where they must prove themselves. On the other hand, Anakin's failure shows the immense difficulty of letting go, a task only accomplishable by a spiritual elite, and not even them. The feeling of attachment to his family proves to be the final turning point, unleashing the storm of anger, rage, and hatred sustained from an early age. However, some family narrative used However, the same family narrative used to implement his transformation to the dark side becomes the instrument for his redemption. For over 20 years, the individual formerly known as Anakin Skywalker suffers as a half human, half cyborg creation named Darth Vader. He requires a recognized body, suit, and constant breathing apparatus to survive due to the wounds received during his bout with Obi-Wan Kenobi. This rebirth on the planet Mustafar signals the second origin story of Anakin Skywalker. In addition to mentally distancing himself from his prior being, Skywalker now has been transformed physically to showcase this change as well. The burns on his body represent the true pain he endures as a result of his path to the dark side. Skywalker pays the price for the power he receives in joining the Sith by losing his friends, his family, friends, and becoming a shell of his former self. As Darth Vader states in an episode of the television series Star Wars Rebels, Anakin Skywalker was weak. I destroyed him, explaining the duality of the personalities within Skywalker. As a result, Yoda's prophecy in Episode 1 regarding the transition to the dark side becomes a reality for Skywalker. Within the 20 years in between the events of Episode 3 and Episode 4, Darth Vader becomes a pawn for the Empire, living in a slavery like arrangement under his master, Emperor Palpatine. Ironically, Darth Vader reverts to this restrictive dichotomy even after receiving power both politically and metaphysically. After rebelling against the similar structure that Jedi incorporated as a Padawan learner, it's surprising and hypocritical that Darth Vader would so willingly return to this relationship format as the Emperor's apprentice. As Skywalker states to Darth Sidious, aka the eventual Emperor, in Episode 3, when deciding to join the Sith, I will do whatever you ask. I pledge myself to your teachings. Skywalker seeks solace within one of the only individuals left whom he has trusted since leaving the confines of slavery. However, at the time, he may be somewhat unaware of the lasting effects of this choice would produce, since it arises out of desperation and selfishness. As a result, compliance and loyalty to a master once more becomes the basis of Darth Vader's existence. As the Emperor's enforcer, Darth Vader is tasked with ensuring that the order remains intact, or that order remains intact in the Empire. Most often, Lord Vader is called in to fight against the growing Rebel Alliance as seen through the television series Star Wars Rebels and episodes 4, 5, and 6 of the Star Wars film franchise. In the time past episode 3, Darth Vader obsesses over tracking and killing the remaining Jedi who survived Order 66. As Skywalker's former Padawan Ahsoka Tano states in an episode of Star Wars Rebels, there are no Jedi. You and your Inquisitors have seen to that. The actions Skywalker undertakes later in the saga resembles that of a lost individual, embodying a lack of empathy for fellow creatures in the galaxy. Darth Vader rules with an iron fist through intimidation and fear. His character changes from one who is caring and kind to one without any regard for life. In Episode 4, Darth Vader chokes both rebels and high commanders in the Galactic Empire's military. Then, in Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, Lord Vader unleashes his full might in an attempt to stop the Rebel Alliance, murdering several Imperial admirals once they fail in their pursuit efforts. Furthermore, Darth Vader even cuts off the hand of his own son, Luke Skywalker, trying to convert him to the dark side. Overall, these actions show a departure from the character of Anakin Skywalker, whom the viewer has become familiar with through episodes 1, 2, and 3. The immense violence distances the former Jedi from his past, giving free rein to the new individual born in the depths of Mustafar in episode 3. In the end, Darth Vader's son, Luke Skywalker, develops into a strong entity driving the dark side's apprentice to return to grace once again. The family ideal that pushed Anakin Skywalker towards the dark side is also the same force which draws him back to the light, resulting in his spirit's redemption. After a lengthy battle aboard the second Death Star, Emperor Palpatine fails to lure Luke Skywalker to the dark side. In retaliation, the Emperor says, "Now, young Skywalker, you will die," utilizing Force lightning to push the young Jedi to the brinks of death. After hearing cries from his son, Darth Vader recognizes the internal conflict within himself. By destroying the Emperor, Vader most certainly will kill himself in the process. However, the importance of family still lingers within the remnants of humanity in Lord Vader. The failures of the past once more manifest themselves, presenting the opportunity to save his own kin in an act of self sacrifice. In the action, Vader proclaims, "No," and throws the Emperor down a power shaft, killing both individuals. Even as Andrew Gordon writes, indeed, at the end, Vader is converted into a good guy, no longer Death Father, but a kindly father who sacrifices himself to save his son. Just before he dies, though, Darth Vader is afforded the opportunity to look at his son with his real eyes, a powerful moment connecting the Star Wars saga. Furthermore, as Cass R. Sunstein notes about the necessity of Luke Skywalker redeeming his father, one reason we love other people is that they help us to love ourselves. Luke Skywalker's actions in Episode 6, attempting to see the good that was once within his father, in spite of all the harm and suffering that he has caused, enables Darth Vader to realize that hope exists for himself. The importance of family that was ingrained within Anakin Skywalker as a young slave culminates through his final redemption, retrieving his good natured spirit. As Cassar Sunstein states, attachment is also the reason for his choice to return to the light. He can't bear to see his son die. In the end, Star Wars insists that you can't be redeemed without attachment. That's the strongest message of the saga, and that's what makes it speak to people's deepest selves. In defeating the Emperor, himself and the Sith, Anakin Skywalker fulfills the prophecy of the Chosen One, as described in Episode 1, bringing balance to the Force. After analysis of his character, the traits from Anakin Skywalker's past in slavery shape his path towards evil. These same characteristics, though, also lead to his final redemption. The emotions of fear, anger, rage, hatred, passion, desire, and longing are natural feelings that a slave in his position learn and understand from an early age. However, at this point in the saga, Skywalker maintains two separate origin stories depicting two different characters. Despite his attempt to distance himself from the being that was known as Anakin Skywalker, Lord Vader still embodies the basic essence of his prior self. The traumatic experience of slavery and the relevant details associated with the institution produce a form of trauma continually impacting Skywalker during the remainder of his life. The effects of this early period in Skywalker's development linger within his subconscious thoughts and feelings at the conclusion of the saga. And with that, folks, we have reached the end. I have now gotten to my bibliography here, and that has concluded my senior thesis. And also concluding my senior thesis is a picture of the three Force ghosts at the end: Anakin Skywalker, Yoda, and Obi-Wan Kenobi looking at Luke Skywalker at the end of Return of the Jedi. Also, very similar to the picture that you see as the logo for Force Ghost Conversations. So that, folks, also concludes my senior thesis. So that is a collection of essays regarding Anakin Skywalker's origin, and that's the first time that both you and I, first off, that I've listened, even looked at it since December of 2016. Literally submitted, I think, a week or two before Rogue One came out, and boy, I think I would have included that hallway sequence and all that stuff and probably some Rogue One elements within this story as well. Certainly stuff with Obi-Wan Kenobi, Rise of Skywalker, Last Jedi, of course, too. Maybe some more Force Awakens might have come in there, as I probably would have maybe done a whole other essay on the legacy of Anakin Skywalker and how the familial elements of there are impacted. All that might come into play. I think more of the Vader comics, especially the Charles Soule line from 2017 and beyond, would have definitely been referred to in this thing as well. But it is interesting to note that this is a time and place. This is from a time at pre-Rogue One. The Star Wars community was in a really great place, I will say, just overall, and I'm very positive towards everything and looking forward to the future and dissecting every bit of new canon that came out for new stories and potential thoughts and ideas that may be exploited in future films or anything like that. And now here we are in 2024, almost 2025, just about 10 years later from the time of writing this. Yeah, this is it. So thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed this kind of academic look at Star Wars and for allowing me to both read this out loud, and thank you for listening. If you really want to find it yourself, I do believe that there's a copy of this in the library at Hood College. So you just look under my name, it should be there. I think it also might be in the Frederick County Library System, maybe the one of the at the Sieber Arts Library in downtown Frederick, Maryland. I have some other papers there as well in the Maryland room. So if you want really want to see my academic career, it is on full display there. So with that, folks, that is all I had for this week. Again, I hope that you're following us along on all the social channels for our ICC adventures that are currently taking place. So make sure you're following us on all those platforms. And we'll be back next week with our recap on ICCC. So very excited to bring that all to you because we have a great handheld recording device now that we can kind of go around and just kind of muse thoughts as we're walking through the convention floor and talk to people as we're standing in line and all that stuff. So a lot of cool stuff on the way for Force Cooks Conversations in the near future. So thank you all for staying tuned. May the Force be with you. Take care.